The Oath Among Ashes. The smoke had long faded, but the scent of ruin still clung to the earth. What had once been Harcourt Manor, proud and silver-stoned, now stood as a hollow carcass against the grey of dawn, its windows gaping like the eyes of a fallen giant, its gardens charred into black skeletons. Crows perched where roses once bloomed, and the wind whispered through broken arches like the breath of ghosts. Lady Evelyn Harcourt stood at the edge of the ruins, her gloved hands trembling though the morning was not cold. A tattered shawl clung to her shoulders, the hem damp with dew and ash. The world around her was silent, save for the groan of the wounded timbers, as if the house itself still mourned. She did not weep. She had wept enough when the fire devoured her home, when her father's body was found beneath the fallen beams, when her brother never returned from the war that had stolen him. Her heart had hardened, turned to glass, fragile and sharp. "No more," she whispered, her voice a ghost among ghosts. "I will never love again." It was not a cry of despair, but a vow, an oath forged in the heat of loss, bound by the ashes of all she once held dear. A gust of wind stirred her skirts, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke that no rain could wash away. She turned toward the distant fields, where the first rays of the sun bled through the mist, gilding the desolation in gold. Beyond the meadow, labourers already worked to clear debris, their hammers ringing faintly in the quiet morning. Her tenants, her people, had lost almost as much as she had, yet they looked to her with eyes that begged for strength. And so she gave it, though she felt none. "Milady," came a hesitant voice from behind her. It was Mrs. Lark, the housekeeper, her once round face now hollowed by sleepless nights. "You should rest. You've been standing here since dawn." "I cannot rest," Eveline replied softly, not turning. "There is too much to do. The tenants need supplies before winter, and the village has no grain left to spare." Mrs. Lark hesitated, wringing her hands. "The Crown soldiers passed through the village this morning. Their captain, he asked to see you." Eveline's brows drew together. "A soldier?" "Yes, my lady. Said he was sent from London to offer aid." "A captain? Thorn, I believe." The name stirred nothing in her, not yet, only weariness. "Send him to the hall," she said, "if there is one beam still standing for him to stand beneath." Mrs. Lark nodded and withdrew, her steps crunching softly on the charred gravel. Eveline turned back toward the ruins once more. The manor loomed before her like a wounded beast, its once grand facade marred by blackened stone and twisted iron. Somewhere within, beneath layers of soot and memory, her childhood laughter still lingered, echoing faintly in the hollow corridors of her mind. And it was there, in that very place where her heart had burned, that Captain Lucian Thorn would soon enter her life. The sound of hooves broke the silence hours later, firm, deliberate, and unhurried. Eveline looked up from the scattered plans on her makeshift table, a plank of wood balanced on two barrels in what had been the drawing-room. The rider approached through the mist, a tall man astride a black stallion, his coat dark with travel, his posture straight as a blade. When he dismounted, she saw the faint limp in his stride and the gleam of medals pinned carelessly to his chest, as though he bore them more from duty than pride. He removed his gloves slowly, revealing hands scarred and steady. His eyes, when they met hers, were the colour of winter steel, unreadable, haunted, and piercing. "Lady Harcourt," he said, bowing with military precision. "Captain Lucian Thorn, at your service. His Majesty's Office of Reconstruction has sent me to assess the damage and provide relief where possible." His voice was deep, controlled, but there was something restrained within it, a tension like a man holding his breath. Eveline regarded him coolly. "Reconstruction, Captain. You are a soldier, not a builder." He straightened. "War leaves ruins of many kinds, my lady. We are asked on occasion to mend what we have helped break." Her gaze sharpened. "Did you help break this?" Lucien paused. The question struck deeper than she could have guessed. "Not by choice," he said quietly, "but perhaps by consequence." The silence stretched between them, heavy as smoke. Eveline turned away, unwilling to show the tremor that ran through her hand. "I do not need your sympathy, Captain Thorne, nor your help. The Harcourts have rebuilt before. Yet this time you stand alone," he said gently, without accusation. Her breath caught, but she did not answer. They walked the ruins together, though she had not invited him to. His gaze moved across the wreckage with the measured attention of a man who had seen too much loss to be surprised by it. He stooped once to lift a child's toy from the soot. A wooden horse, half burned. "Yours?" he asked. "My brother's," she said softly. "He took it to the front when he joined the regiment." She hesitated, her voice faltering. "He never returned." Lucien set the toy down carefully, as though afraid to break the memory that clung to it. "I fought in that same regiment," he said, his tone almost a confession. "The 42nd Foot. Harcourt. Your brother's name was Charles." Her eyes snapped to his. "You knew him?" "I did," Lucien said quietly. "He saved my life once, near Salamanca. I owed him a debt I never repaid." Eveline's composure cracked for the first time. "Then you know," she whispered, "that he died for nothing." He flinched, as if struck. "No, my lady, he died for honor, for men who did not deserve his loyalty, myself among them." Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with restrained fury. "Spare me your soldier's creed, Captain. Honor does not rebuild homes. It does not bring back fathers or brothers." Lucien bowed his head. "No," he said, "it does not." For a moment, the only sound was the whisper of the wind through broken stone. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. "I cannot undo what has been done, Lady Harcourt, but I can help you rebuild. Allow me to serve, not as a soldier, but as a man who owes your family more than you know." She hesitated. Pride warred with exhaustion, grief with reason. The fire had taken everything, even her will to fight. Yet something in his voice, in the sincerity beneath the guilt, struck a chord she could not silence. "You will not find gratitude here, Captain," she said finally. "Only ashes." Lucien's gaze softened. "Then that is where I will begin." Days passed. He returned each morning, helping the workers haul timber and clear rubble, his uniform soon stained with soot and earth. Eveline watched from a distance, unwilling to admit how his presence steadied the restless fear that haunted the estate. At night, when the world grew quiet, she sometimes caught sight of him by the campfire near the stables, alone, writing by lantern light. The letters never left his possession. He would fold them, stare at the flames, and burn them one by one. Mrs. Lark, ever curious, whispered one evening as they watched him from the kitchen window. "He works like a man chasing ghosts, milady. Never speaks unless spoken to. Never eats more than a crust. What kind of soldier carries sorrow heavier than his pack?" "The dangerous kind," Eveline murmured. Still, she could not deny that his arrival had changed something. The tenants spoke of him with quiet respect. Children followed him as he repaired the bridge near the mill, and the men listened when he gave instruction. It unsettled her. How easily he belonged in a place she'd thought cursed. One afternoon, rain began to fall as Evelyn crossed the scorched courtyard, carrying a ledger. The sky was low and bruised, the air thick with the promise of another storm. She paused beneath the great oak that had survived the fire, a lone sentinel amid ruin. Lucienne stood there already, hat in hand, gazing up at the blackened walls of the manor. "This house must have been magnificent once," he said quietly. "It was," she replied, "until war took my brother, and the fire took the rest." He turned to her. "And love?" Her lips parted slightly. "Love?" "Yes," he said, his voice low, searching. "Did that perish too?" Evelyn's pulse quickened. "Love," she said coldly, "is the kindling of all ruin. I have no use for it." Lucien's eyes lingered on her face, not in pity, but in recognition. "Then we're alike," he said, "for I swore the same once." The rain began to fall harder, drumming softly on the broken stone. Evelyn drew her shawl tighter, but he made no move to leave. "You should go inside, Captain," she said. "The storm—" "Will pass," he finished, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "They always do." Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, she saw not a soldier, but a man, weary, wounded, and still standing amid the wreckage of his own past. She turned away before he could see the tremor in her hands. That night, long after the workers had gone and the rain had ceased, Evelyn walked once more among the ruins. The moon hung low, silvering the broken stones. And in that ghostly light, she saw him again, kneeling before the remnants of the great hearth, his head bowed. For a moment, she thought he prayed. But as she drew closer, she heard the words he whispered, barely audible, "Forgive me, Charles." Her heart stilled. The name struck like a bell in the hollow of her chest. She froze, hidden by shadow, the truth dawning slow and terrible. Captain Lucian Thorne had not merely known her brother. He carried the guilt of his death. And perhaps, just perhaps, the fire that consumed her home was no accident, but the shadow of that same sin. Evelyn stepped back, her breath unsteady, her vow echoing like thunder in her mind. She had sworn never to love again. And now, fate had brought her the one man who would test that promise, with every secret, every scar, and every look that threatened to shatter the walls she had built. A stranger with haunted eyes. The village of Ashbourne lay nestled in the rolling hills beyond the ruins of Harcourt Manor. A patchwork of timber-framed cottages, cobblestone streets, and the lingering scent of smoke from last week's fire. Though spared from the conflagration that had devoured the manor, it had not escaped misfortune. Crops had failed. Barns had collapsed. And families whispered of famine. Evelyn rode through the morning mist in a black cloak, her horse's hooves splashing in puddles as she made her way to inspect the damage. Her heart felt heavy beneath the hood of her cloak, each step a reminder that the life she had known, the life her family had built for generations, had vanished into ash. Yet she moved with purpose. She would restore her estate. She would care for her people. Love had no place in the life she now commanded. And yet, her thoughts, stubborn and unwelcome, drifted to the figure she had left in the ruins hours ago. Captain Lucian Thorne, his haunted eyes, the faint tremor in his voice when he whispered her brother's name. Even the memory of him kneeling in the moonlight made her pulse quicken, though she would not admit it, not to herself, not to anyone. By mid-morning, Evelyn had arrived at the village square. Her tenants gathered, hesitant, each bearing some fragment of their lost livelihood. She dismounted gracefully, her skirts brushing the wet cobblestones. "Good morning, milady," called Thomas Hale, a sturdy man whose barn had collapsed in the fire. "We've cleared what we can, but we'll need more timber, and the children are still cold at night." Evelyn nodded, her jaw firm. "We'll have provisions delivered by tomorrow, and I'll see to the repairs personally. Bring me a list of supplies needed." As she spoke, a shadow fell across the square. Eveline looked up and froze. There, at the far end of the cobblestone path, stood a figure she had not expected, Captain Lucian Thorne. He had come without ceremony, without announcement. His coat was damp from the morning mist, the collar turned against the chill, yet even in that modest attire, he carried an air of authority that drew every eye. He did not speak immediately. He simply watched, a quiet sentinel, as if measuring the damage alongside her. Eveline's fingers tightened around the reins. "Captain Thorne," she said, her voice carrying over the murmurs of the villagers, "what brings you here?" He inclined his head slightly. "I heard the village required assistance. I thought it prudent to see for myself." A murmur ran through the assembled villagers. Some whispered his name in awe, others in curiosity. But Eveline noticed something that no one else did, the way his gaze lingered on the ruined cottages, on the frightened children, on the labourers who toiled despite fatigue. There was pain there, yes, but also a quiet determination that mirrored her own. "You have done enough already," she said, her tone firm, though her heart betrayed a flicker of relief. "Your duties at the manor are already more than any one man could bear." Lucien's lips curved faintly, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Perhaps, but it is easier to mend what is broken here than what is broken in one's own heart." Eveline blinked. His words, carefully measured, struck too close to something she had long buried. She looked away, focusing on the villagers, refusing to let him see the flicker of emotion that stirred. Later that day, as they walked along the edge of the village, Eveline found herself compelled to speak, to test the man's sincerity. "Why do you concern yourself with us, Captain? Surely the Crown's interest is elsewhere. Why the Harcourts?" Lucien's gaze shifted toward the horizon, his jaw tightening. "The Harcourts have a history of honour and courage. Your family has given much to this kingdom. I am here because it is right to do so, and because I am indebted to a man who once gave his life for mine." Eveline's heart stuttered. "You speak of my brother." He did not flinch. Instead, he met her gaze squarely. "Charles Harcourt saved my life. Twice in battle. I failed him the second time. If my presence here can ease the suffering his absence has caused, then perhaps it is a measure of redemption." She wanted to scream at him, to demand why fate had entwined her with the man whose life intersected so tragically with her own. But the anger, for once, was tangled with something she did not understand, something dangerously close to gratitude. "Your words are noble, Captain," she said, her tone guarded, "but words do not rebuild homes or feed children." "No," he admitted, "but they can inspire those who do." The afternoon brought more rain, and the pair took shelter beneath a half-standing barn. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and wood, mingling with the faint tang of smoke from the manor that lingered miles away. Eveline watched him silently as he knelt to examine the beams, running his fingers along splintered wood. "You move as if you can sense what each beam needs," she said almost inadvertently. He looked up, and for a fleeting moment his expression softened. "Experience teaches more than books ever could," he replied. "A house is like a living thing. You learn its language over time, how it creaks, how it groans, where it will bend, and where it will break. Eveline's thoughts drifted. She remembered the manor before the fire, its laughter, its warmth, the faint smell of her mother's rose gardens that once clung to every corner. "I fear that some things cannot be learned again," she whispered. Lucien rose, his hand brushing wet hair from his forehead. "Perhaps," he said gently, "but what is lost can sometimes be rebuilt, stronger than before." For a heartbeat, their eyes locked. She saw in him a mirror of her own grief, tempered with resilience. Yet she could not, would not, allow herself to reach across the chasm of their shared sorrow. Not now, not ever, she swore. As the storm eased, a young boy approached them, his boots caked in mud. "Milady," he said, eyes wide. "There's someone asking for you at the inn. He says he knows of the fire, and the man responsible." Eveline's pulse quickened, but she forced her face into calm neutrality. Lucien noticed the flicker of tension and stepped closer. "Do you wish me to accompany you?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, there are truths I must face." Together they mounted their horses and rode toward the inn at the edge of the village. The sky was clearing, but the air remained heavy with the scent of wet stone and smoke. Eveline could not shake the feeling that the moment she entered that inn, the fragile equilibrium of her carefully guarded heart would be tested. And when they dismounted, she saw him, a man whose eyes were shadowed and calculating, whose presence carried the weight of secrets she was not yet ready to confront. "Lady Harcourt," he said, bowing slightly, "I've been expecting you." Lucien's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his sword, though he said nothing. His eyes flicked to hers, silently warning her that danger and revelation were both waiting inside. Eveline swallowed hard. The air was thick with tension, and for the first time since the fire, she felt the stirrings of something she had buried deep. Curiosity. And beneath it, an unease she could not yet name. In that moment, she realized that her past, her grief, and perhaps even her vow to never love again, were all about to collide with the man whose haunted eyes had already begun to see into hers. Shadows of the battlefield. The inn smelled of damp wood and stale ale, but Eveline Harcourt hardly noticed. Every sense was alert, attuned to the man who waited in the corner, a stranger whose presence made the hairs on the back of her neck rise. Lucien Thorne remained close, standing as a silent shadow beside her, his hand brushing the hilt of his sword more out of habit than fear. The man's eyes were sharp, cold and calculating, yet there was a flicker of recognition when they met Eveline's gaze. He was tall and lean, with a scar that traced a jagged path across his left cheek, and the air of someone accustomed to command. He smiled faintly, but it was a smile devoid of warmth. "Lady Harcourt," he said smoothly, rising from his chair, "I hear your estate suffered a great tragedy. Fires, debts, war, all in one season." Eveline's lips tightened. "You speak as if you are familiar with my family's misfortune," she said cautiously. "Perhaps you are, or perhaps you merely wish to claim it as gossip." The man's eyes darkened. "Neither, Lady Harcourt. I am here because I know the truth about the fire." A cold tremor ran down Eveline's spine. The fire, the ruin, the shadow of that night she had sworn never to forget. Her hand tightened on her riding cloak. And what truth might that be? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. It was not a random accident. Someone wished to see Harcourt Manor reduced to ashes. Eveline's breath caught. She glanced at Lucien. He said nothing, but she could feel the tension in his stance, the rigid control that masked a storm beneath. "Why bring this to me?" Eveline asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "If this is a threat, then I will not be intimidated." The man shook his head. "I am no threat yet. I come with warning. There are those who will continue to pursue the Harcourt legacy with fire and steel, and they will stop at nothing." Lucien finally spoke, his voice low and commanding. "You would do well to leave now," he said. "Your business here is with truth, yes, but threats are best faced with caution. And you, sir, are clearly not here to offer tea and pleasantries." The stranger's eyes flicked to Lucien, recognizing the authority in the soldier's posture. "Ah, Captain Thorn, the very man whose presence seems unavoidable. You have your debts, do you not?" Eveline stiffened. Her memory flashed back to the ruins, to Lucien kneeling in the moonlight, whispering her brother's name. Was this man connected to the fire, to her family's suffering? And why did it feel as if Lucien carried a weight too heavy to bear alone? "I suggest you speak plainly," Lucien said, his voice calm but edged with steel, "before I lose my patience." The stranger leaned back, assessing them both. "Very well. Captain Thorn, you know what it means to fight battles that are not your own. You also know what happens when loyalty fails. Lady Harcourt, your estate was marked, a warning, not a mere act of cruelty. And the man responsible," he paused, letting the weight of his words settle, "was someone you already trusted." Eveline's eyes narrowed. "Who?" she demanded. The man's lips curved in a thin smile. "Not here, not yet, but mark my words. Shadows linger where the battlefield has left its scars. And those scars can touch everything you hold dear." After the stranger departed, Eveline and Lucien walked through the village in silence. The words hung between them like storm clouds. Lucien finally spoke when they reached the river that cut through the fields. "You believe him?" she asked, her voice barely above the ripple of the current. "I do," Lucien admitted. "The fire, the timing, the method, it was calculated. Someone wanted more than ruin. They wanted fear." Eveline clenched her fists. "And you?" she asked sharply. "Do you have any part in this?" He looked away, gaze tracing the river's edge, muscles tense. "I am part of the past, yes, but not the villain. I am a witness to the consequences, and sometimes the consequences are crueler than the crime itself." Her heart twisted. She wanted to hate him, to push him away, to cling to the oath she had made in the ruins. But the truth was slippery. Her anger, her grief, even her suspicion were all tangled with the undeniable pull she felt toward him, a pull that was growing stronger each day. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the village was bathed in the golden haze of twilight, Lucien returned to the manor. Eveline met him at what remained of the grand entrance, the wind tugging at her skirts. "I've spoken to the workers," she said. "The roof will take weeks, the barns months, and the grain shipment, it will barely last through the winter." He nodded, his eyes scanning the sky. "We will make do, one step at a time." "You speak with confidence," she said softly. "Yet I sense you carry a burden heavier than the ruins themselves." He looked at her, the haunted depth in his eyes meeting hers. "Every soldier does," he admitted, "but some burdens cannot be cast aside. They follow you home, they linger in shadows, and sometimes they demand payment long after the war has ended." Eveline's pulse quickened. "And what is the payment you seek?" He hesitated. "Redemption, forgiveness, perhaps peace." Her throat tightened. Forgiveness. She had sworn never to love again. Yet even in the quiet of the ruined manor, she felt the stirrings of something she could not name. "You are a stranger in my life," she whispered, "and yet you have already left a mark." Lucien's gaze softened. "Perhaps it is not I who leaves the mark, Lady Harcourt. Perhaps it is fate itself, reminding us that some encounters are inevitable." Eveline looked away, heart racing. Fate, she thought bitterly, had a cruel sense of timing. It had brought her the man whose past intertwined with her loss, whose presence challenged the walls she had built around her heart. And yet, despite herself, she could not deny the flicker of hope, small, fragile, yet persistent, that perhaps, even in the ruins of everything she loved, there was a possibility of something new. The night drew in with a chill, the manor wrapped in shadow. Lucienne knelt once more before the remnants of the grand hall, inspecting the charred beams and broken stones. Eveline watched from the doorway, her breath misting in the cold air. "You work as if the house itself speaks to you," she said softly, unable to contain her curiosity. He glanced up, eyes reflecting the flicker of candlelight. "It does," he said simply. "All places remember. The walls, the floors, the stones, they carry the memory of those who lived, loved, and perished within them. And sometimes, if you listen carefully, they tell you what must be rebuilt." Eveline swallowed hard. In that quiet moment, she realized that the man before her was more than a soldier. He was a keeper of memory, a witness to grief, and perhaps a key to her own healing. But even as she took a step forward, drawn toward him, the shadows of the battlefield, the secrets he bore, the danger that lingered, reminded her of the oath she had made in the ruins. She had sworn never to love again. And yet, Lucien Thorne, the man with haunted eyes and the weight of too many sorrows, had already begun to unravel it. The ball at Ashbourne Hall. The lamps of Ashbourne Hall flickered like fireflies against the creeping night, casting a soft glow over the cobblestone courtyard. The hall, recently restored under Eveline's careful supervision, was alive with music, laughter, and the glitter of candlelight reflecting off crystal chandeliers. For the first time since the fire, the estate breathed again with life, a fragile resurrection that made Eveline's chest tighten with pride. Yet beneath the shimmer of silk and polished marble, tension lingered. Every polite smile and whispered compliment carried a subtle undercurrent of curiosity, of judgment. Guests eyed her carefully, gauging how a woman who had endured such loss could stand at the helm of her family's legacy. Eveline wore a gown of deep emerald, its velvet clinging to her shoulders and falling in soft folds to the floor. Her hair, once tightly bound in mourning, was now swept into an elegant twist, revealing the delicate line of her neck. She moved with grace and purpose, yet every step reminded her that appearances were a shield, one she could not afford to lower. And then there was Lucien Thorne. He arrived with quiet authority, as he always did, but tonight he carried the air of a man out of place among the gilded decadence. His coat was tailored dark and immaculate, but his eyes, those haunted steel-grey eyes, betrayed the weight of the past that no ballroom could erase. When he met her gaze across the hall, Eveline felt a familiar stirring in her chest, a combination of curiosity, caution, and a dangerous pull she had worked so hard to suppress. The orchestra began a waltz, and the room's attention shifted to the dance floor. Eveline hesitated, then found herself guided by her chaperone toward the center. Her eyes darted to Lucien, who had positioned himself near the edge of the hall, observing rather than participating. "Milady, came a familiar voice behind her. It was Lord Hargrave, a wealthy suitor and known opportunist. "Might I have the honour?" Eveline forced a polite smile. "Of course, Lord Hargrave." They moved in rhythm with the music, but her thoughts drifted to Lucien. The contrast was stark. Here, a man dressed to impress, smooth and polished, yet lacking the depth of truth she recognized in the soldier at her side. As the waltz ended, she excused herself, murmuring about needing air, and slipped out into the courtyard, where the moon painted the ruins of the old wing in silver. Lucien was already there, leaning against a marble balustrade. The night air carried the scent of rain and charred timber, mingling with the faint perfume she always wore. "You should not wander alone," he said, his voice low but commanding. "I should not be in a hall full of whispers," she replied, stepping closer. "The eyes of society are not kind to those who have lost everything." Lucien's gaze softened, nor to those who guard their hearts too fiercely. Eveline's breath caught. She looked away, ashamed at how his words unsettled her. "I am not here to speak of hearts," she said. "Perhaps not," he admitted, "but hearts speak nonetheless." For a moment they stood in silence, the ruins behind them and the bustling hall ahead. The tension between them was palpable, a taut thread of desire and restraint. A sudden voice shattered the fragile quiet. "Eveline, there you are!" It was Lady Beatrice, her cousin, draped in diamonds and silk, ever eager to stir trouble. "Do tell me, have you heard the news?" Eveline tensed, recognizing the beginnings of gossip. "What news, Beatrice?" Lady Beatrice's smile was sharp. "They say Captain Thorn has a past shrouded in shadows. Some claim he was involved in scandals during the war, and yet here he is, by your side. Quite the interesting companion, don't you think?" Lucien's jaw tightened, though he remained composed. Eveline stepped forward, her voice firm. "Captain Thorn's past is his own. I suggest we leave speculation to those with less sense." Beatrice's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing further. Yet Eveline sensed that the seeds of scandal had been sown. The evening wore on, and Eveline found herself reluctantly drawn back into the dance floor. She moved gracefully, though her mind was tangled with worry, not only for the whispers in the hall, but for the dangerous truths she had yet to uncover. As the waltz ended, Lucien approached. "May I have this dance?" he asked, offering his hand. Her breath caught. Society may have whispered, and pride may have demanded restraint, yet something in his eyes, the quiet understanding, the unspoken trust, made her hand tremble as she placed it in his. They moved together with ease, their steps in harmony, yet the world around them seemed to fall away. For a moment, there was no gossip, no ruin, no fire. There was only the rhythm of their movements and the shared heartbeat that spoke louder than words. When the dance ended, they stepped apart, and Lucien's hand lingered near hers. "You cannot imagine," he said softly, "how long I have waited for a moment like this." Eveline's pulse quickened, and she struggled to maintain her composure. "Moments such as these are dangerous," she whispered. "Perhaps," he admitted, "but some dangers are worth embracing." Their quiet intimacy was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A man, unannounced, had arrived, dressed in the dark uniform of a foreign envoy, his eyes sharp and calculating. Whispers spread like wildfire. Eveline's heart sank. Danger had followed her here, into the gilded halls and polished floors. Lucien stiffened beside her, the tension in his posture instantly recognizable. "You should not have come," he muttered under his breath, eyes fixed on the newcomer. Eveline swallowed, her mind racing. "I do not understand," she whispered. Who is he?" Lucien's gaze darkened. "Someone from the battlefield," he said. "Someone who knows too much, and someone who may very well threaten everything we are trying to protect." The envoy's eyes met Eveline's, and for the first time she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. He bowed slightly, a gesture of courtesy that was laced with malice. The ball, which had begun as a celebration of renewal, now bristled with tension. Eveline realized, with a sinking heart, that the shadows of her past and the mysteries of Lucien's world were not confined to the ruins. They had followed her into the very heart of Ashburn Hall, and as Lucien's hand found hers once more, steadying and protective, Eveline understood a painful truth. The knight's elegance was but a fragile veneer over a world of danger, secrets, and desires that neither of them could ignore. The kiss beneath the ruins. The ruins of Harcourt Manor lay bathed in a ghostly silver light, as Eveline made her way through the charred remains of what had once been the heart of her family home. The night was quiet, save for the occasional creak of weakened beams and the whisper of the wind through broken windows. Every shadow seemed to echo with memory. The laughter of her brother Charles, the warmth of her father's study, her mother's gentle voice calling her name. And tonight, it was also a place of reckoning. Lucien Thorne had insisted on meeting her here, away from the judgmental eyes of society, away from gossip and intrigue. His expression was taut, haunted, as if every step he took through the ruins weighed heavily upon him. "You should not have come," Eveline said softly, though she had expected him. The words carried a mixture of reproach and something far more vulnerable that she refused to acknowledge. Lucien's eyes, the colour of stormy seas, met hers with a quiet intensity. "I came because you needed to see the truth," he said, "and because I cannot bear to be apart from you." Eveline's heart caught, and she looked away, struggling to maintain the oath she had made months ago in the ashes. Never to love again, yet every fibre of her being rebelled against that vow. They walked through the ruins together, boots crunching against charred wood and stone. Lucien paused at the edge of what had once been the grand hall, his hand brushing against a scorched beam. "This is where it began," he said quietly, voice tinged with regret. "Where your world changed, where my failures began as well." Eveline swallowed hard. "And you claim innocence?" she asked, voice trembling despite herself. "Captain Thorne, I trusted you, and yet I cannot forget that you were there." He flinched at her words, though he did not withdraw. "I was there, yes," he admitted, "but not by design, by circumstance. I failed to prevent it, and I have lived with that every day since." Her breath caught. The anger she had carefully nurtured over months surged forward, mixed with something far more confusing: pity, understanding, and the dangerous pull of attraction. "You lived with it," she whispered, "and yet you have returned as if nothing has changed." "I have returned," he said, stepping closer, "because everything has changed, because I have to make it right, not only for your family, but for myself, and because I cannot hide from you any longer." Eveline's pulse quickened, and she felt a tremor in her hands. "Lucien," she began, then faltered, unsure if she was speaking a warning or a plea. A sudden noise, the snap of a loose beam, made them both start. Lucien reached for her instinctively, his hands warm around hers. Their eyes met, and in that instant the barriers between them seemed to crumble. "You shouldn't be here," Eveline whispered, though the sound was weak. "It's dangerous." "And yet," he murmured, stepping closer, "this is the only place I can be, with you." The air between them was charged, every heartbeat echoing in the hollow ruins. Lucien's eyes searched hers for permission, and though fear and anger warred within her, Eveline found herself leaning forward, drawn by the force of everything they had endured together. Then, as if pulled by inevitability, their lips met. It was a kiss born of months of longing, of unspoken grief, of shared danger and fragile trust. The world outside the ruins ceased to exist. The night air, the shadows of charred beams, even the memories of loss faded into insignificance. There was only the heat of his touch, the gentleness behind the strength in his arms, and the realization that their hearts had always known this moment, even if their minds had denied it. When they finally parted, both were breathless, trembling with the intensity of emotion they had tried so hard to suppress. Eveline began, but her voice failed. Lucien cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing against her cheek. "Shh," he whispered, "no words, not yet. Let the ruins bear witness to what words cannot capture." She closed her eyes, letting herself lean into him, into the warmth she had resisted for so long. The ruins, a symbol of destruction, grief, and loss, had become the setting for a moment of creation. The birth of something new, fragile, and yet undeniably real. A sudden rustle of movement in the shadows brought them both alert. Lucien's hands went instinctively to her waist, shielding her. From the darkness emerged Thomas Hale, the loyal tenant who had always aided Eveline. "My lady, sir," he said nervously, bowing slightly, I thought you should know. There are men from the neighbouring estates asking questions about the fire, and your presence tonight. They do not mean well." Eveline's pulse quickened again, but she did not release Lucien's hand. "We expected nothing else," she said. "It seems danger follows us, no matter where we go." Lucien nodded. "Then we face it together." And in that moment, surrounded by the remnants of her past, Eveline realized something vital. The fire had taken much from her home, her family, her innocence. But it had not taken everything. Love, dangerous and terrifying, could still exist amidst the ashes. She looked up at Lucien, and in her eyes he saw the reflection of hope, fragile, shimmering, yet unbreakable. "Then we rebuild," she whispered, almost to herself. "Not just the manor, not just the walls, but everything, together." Lucien pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. A vow without words. "Together," he agreed. The night stretched on, but Eveline lingered in the ruins, unwilling to leave the place where grief and love had collided so violently, yet so beautifully. Somewhere in the distance, the moonlight glinted off the broken stones, casting long shadows that reminded her that the past was never truly gone. But for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of certainty. Amid the ruins, with Lucien by her side, she might just find a future worth living. A future where love could bloom again, even after fire and loss. Betrayal at dawn. The first light of dawn crept over Ashbourne, painting the village in muted gold and silver. The quiet of morning belied the turmoil that had taken root in Evelyn Harcourt's heart overnight. She had slept little, haunted by uneasy dreams of fire, shadows, and a man whose gaze hid more than it revealed. But she was not alone. Lucien Thorne had returned late, exhausted and silent, his haunted eyes more stormy than ever. They had spoken little after the kiss in the ruins. Words had felt unnecessary, almost fragile, but the air between them was charged with tension and unspoken promises. Eveline rose before him that morning, feeling an unfamiliar resolve harden her spine. Today, she would face the threats surrounding her family, confront the conspiracy that had destroyed so much, and perhaps in doing so, protect the fragile bond that had begun to grow between her and Lucien. She rode to the manor grounds, where labourers had resumed their work clearing debris. The morning air was crisp, scented with wet earth and lingering smoke. Eveline dismounted and began inspecting the progress, unaware of the shadow creeping among the trees along the estate's perimeter. Before she could react, a sharp cry echoed through the courtyard. Lucien's hand shot to the hilt of his sword as armed men appeared, emerging from the tree line with precision and purpose. "Lady Harcourt," one barked, his tone devoid of ceremony. "Step aside. You are under the Crown's authority." Eveline's eyes narrowed. "Crown's authority? You dare threaten me in my own home?" The men hesitated for only a moment. It was Lucien who moved first, stepping between Eveline and the intruders, his stance protective. "They are lying," he said, voice steady despite the tension. "No crown has sanctioned this. Move, Eveline, before they force us apart." But before she could respond, a surge of men overwhelmed them. Lucien fought with the precision and strength of a seasoned soldier, his sword flashing in the early light. Yet even he was outnumbered. Within moments, he was captured, bound, and dragged toward a waiting carriage. Eveline's scream tore through the morning air. "Lucien!" She ran toward him, but a hand grabbed her arm. Thomas Hale, loyal and strong, held her back. "Milady, it is too dangerous," he shouted. "If you follow, you will be captured too." "I cannot leave him," she cried, struggling against his grip. "Not him! Never him!" Thomas's eyes softened. "Then trust me, my lady. You must act wisely. You are our only hope now." The carriage bearing Lucien disappeared down the misty road, leaving Eveline trembling with a mixture of fear, rage, and helplessness. She sank to the ground, fists gripping the dirt beneath her. Every moment without him felt like an eternity. The world, already fragile from the fire and ruin, seemed to tilt toward despair. But despair was not her way. She had survived fire. She had survived loss. She would not survive by standing still while the man she loved faced treachery alone. By midday, Eveline had gathered her closest allies, loyal tenants, a few discreet soldiers who had remained in Ashbourne, and Thomas Hale, and set out to track the carriage. Every instinct, every intuition, guided her through the misty forests and winding roads. Along the way, she pieced together what little information she could. Lucien had been accused of crimes he did not commit, framed for treason, orchestrated by a shadowy figure from his past. The same man who had caused devastation in her family's life seemed to be orchestrating every move, pulling strings that threatened to undo everything she and Lucien had begun to rebuild. She felt the weight of the world pressing against her shoulders, yet beneath it all, a steely determination took root. She would not fail him. She would not let injustice prevail. And she would not allow her heart, fragile as it had been, to break again. As night fell, Eveline approached the hideout where Lucien was being held, a crumbling manor on the outskirts of a rival estate. She crouched in the shadows, surveying the guards and calculating her approach. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and adrenaline, but she did not hesitate. Drawing upon the skills she had cultivated in months of managing her estate and defending her people, Eveline moved with quiet precision. She incapacitated 2 guards silently, slipped through a side entrance, and found herself in a corridor lined with portraits of long-dead ancestors who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Lucien was in a small chamber, bound to a chair, but alive. His eyes met hers the moment she entered, a mixture of relief and exasperation flashing across his face. "You came," he whispered, voice hoarse. "I always will," she said firmly, moving to untie him. "Never doubt that. Not for a moment." He grinned, weak but genuine. "I should have known. Lady Harcourt does not surrender." She laughed softly despite the tension. "Nor will I allow treachery to win." Their escape was perilous. The halls were patrolled, the night tense with every step. Yet Eveline's resolve never wavered. Side by side, she and Lucian fought their way through the manor, shadows and moonlight their allies. Every glance, every brush of their hands spoke of a trust and intimacy forged in fire and hardship. Finally, they reached the stables, where a horse awaited. Lucien mounted first, then extended his hand to her. Evelyn took it without hesitation, lifting herself into the saddle behind him. As they rode into the night, the danger behind them, Eveline rested her head against Lucian's back. She felt the tension drain from him, felt the relief and trust radiate between them. And in that moment, she understood something profound. True love was not fragile. It was not destroyed by fire, betrayal, or shadowed threats. It was forged in adversity, strengthened by courage, and unbroken by distance or danger. By dawn, the first light painted the year-on horizon with hues of gold and rose. Eveline and Lucian had returned to the safety of Ashbourne, exhausted but unbroken. The bonds of their trust had deepened, tempered by peril and shared courage. Eveline looked at him, and in the quiet of the early morning whispered, "We survived the night, together." Lucian pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "And we will face every dawn like this, together." The shadows of the battlefield, the schemes of enemies, and the pain of the past remained. But as Eveline looked into Lucian's haunted, steadfast eyes, she realized that the future, their future, was something worth fighting for. The fire returns. Ashbourne Manor lay quiet under a blanket of mist, the morning sun casting soft gold across the partially rebuilt halls. The estate, scarred but resilient, had begun to breathe again, thanks to Eveline's unwavering determination and Lucian's steadfast support. For a moment, it seemed that peace might finally settle over the Harcourts. But peace is always fragile, especially when the past has teeth. The first warning came as a whisper, a flicker of smoke along the east wing, carried faintly on the morning breeze. Eveline, ever vigilant, was the first to notice. Her heart clenched, not from fear but recognition. The scent of fire, the shadow of destruction. Lucien appeared at her side in an instant, the tension in his body mirrored in hers. "It's too early," he muttered, scanning the horizon. "Not possible, unless—" Eveline's mind raced. "The same man," she said, voice tight. "He's back." By midday, the full truth was revealed. A rival estate lord, long bitter over old debts and jealous of the Harcourt's resilience, had orchestrated the fires and attacks. His greed and vengeance had caused months of ruin, but now his ambition had escalated into outright arson. Lucien's jaw tightened. "He wants everything destroyed. He thinks if he can destroy your home again, he can break you." Eveline's eyes blazed with determination. "He underestimates us," she said, "and he underestimates me." The final confrontation came that evening. The rival lord, flanked by hired men, had infiltrated the outer grounds, planning to ignite a series of hidden flammable stores that would reduce the estate to ashes once more. Eveline, armed with intelligence and resolve, met him in the east wing, Lucien close at her side. You should have stayed away, Lucien said, voice low, steel underlying every word. You have nothing to gain here. The rival sneered. I have everything to gain. This estate, your fortune, and finally, revenge. Eveline stepped forward, her skirts brushing scorched stone. Revenge is a hollow pursuit, and yet you still cling to it, even as your plans fail around you. The man lunged, and chaos erupted. Lucien moved with precision, disarming the aggressors and shielding Evelyn. She fought too, wielding courage sharper than any sword, confronting her enemy with the authority of a woman who had lost everything and refused to be defeated again. Flames flickered around the hall, but this time they did not consume hope. Lucien and Evelyn worked together, instinctively, in perfect harmony, to extinguish the fire, subdue the attackers, and reclaim the estate. When the danger finally passed, Evelyn stood amid the ruined but surviving east wing, sweat and soot clinging to her skin. Lucien's hand found hers again, and she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. You were magnificent, he said softly. You faced it all, and you never faltered. Evelyn shook her head, her voice trembling with emotion. No, Lucien, we faced it all, together. He drew her close, forehead resting against hers. Together, he repeated, as if sealing a vow that had begun in the ruins and had grown through fire, shadow, and danger. The weeks that followed were filled with restoration, celebration, and a quiet peace. Ashbourne Manor was rebuilt, stronger than before, and the estate thrived under Eveline's watchful eye. Lucien remained by her side, his past reconciled with her present, their hearts intertwined in ways neither could deny. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Eveline and Lucien walked through the gardens, now vibrant with spring blooms. You swore never to love again, Lucien said, voice tinged with playful accusation. I did, Evelyn admitted, her lips curving into a smile. And yet, she stopped, looking up at him. And yet, here we are. Lucien took her hands in his, eyes steady and filled with unwavering devotion. Perhaps some oaths are meant to be broken in order to create something stronger. Eveline leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. Something unbreakable, she whispered. And in the warm glow of the setting sun, amid the restored beauty of Ashbourne, they knew it was true. Love had returned, fierce, enduring, and infinitely more powerful for all they had endured. The fires of the past had forged them, the shadows had tested them, and now, together they faced a future built not on ashes, but on hope. When he kneeled in the ruins, the morning sun poured over Ashbourne Manor, gilding the restored walls and gardens with soft light, but Evelyn Harcourt felt no comfort in the polished halls. Her heart drew her elsewhere, to the ruins that had once been her home, to the remnants of fire and loss that had shaped her very soul. Lucien Thorne had requested she meet him there, in the charred remains of the great hall, where the echoes of the past still lingered. She arrived on foot, her skirts brushing the ash-strewn stones, the memories of that tragic night returning with every step. Yet this time the fear was tempered with anticipation. And there he was. Lucien knelt amid the ruins, not in the shadow of duty or honour, but stripped bare of pretense and burden, his hands resting lightly on the cracked stone floor. The sunlight caught the edges of his hair, the sharpness of his jaw, and the stormy grey of his eyes. He looked up at her with a quiet vulnerability she had never seen before. Evelyn, he said, voice low and unwavering, I have no words grand enough to undo the past, no deeds noble enough to repay the life and trust you've given me. Her chest tightened. She had known him as soldier, protector, and saviour. But now, kneeling before her in the ruins of everything they had survived, he was simply Lucien, the man she loved. "I ask for nothing," he continued, "save your heart, and if you choose to give it, know that I will guard it as fiercely as I have ever guarded my own life." The weight of his words settled over her like the calm after a storm. Eveline stepped closer, her eyes scanning the ruins around them. Charred beams, cracked stone, remnants of loss. And for the first time, she saw beauty in their survival. The fire had taken much, but it had not taken them. It had not taken their courage, their resilience, or the love that had grown quietly amid the ashes. "You kneel," she whispered, voice trembling, "in the place where I swore I would never love again." Lucien reached for her hands, lifting them to his lips. "Then let this be the place where vows are remade," he said softly, "where grief transforms into hope and love proves its strength." Her heart surged, and the walls she had built so carefully began to crumble. She had feared love, yet here it stood, unshakable, tender, and alive. The power of their journey, the shared trials, and the forgiveness that had taken root, now culminated in this singular moment of clarity. Love was never weakness. It had been her strength all along. Eveline fell to her knees beside him, bridging the chasm that had so often separated them. "I was wrong," she admitted, her forehead brushing his. "I swore I would never love again. But love is what saved me. It is what brought us both here." Lucien smiled, a rare, unguarded expression that illuminated his face. "Then let us rise together," he said, standing slowly and helping her to her feet. "Let the ruins witness the beginning of everything we are meant to be." For a long moment they stood in silence, hands entwined, hearts beating in unison. The past, the fire, the betrayal, the battles, and the grief was present, yes, but it no longer had power over them. The ruins were no longer a place of sorrow, but of transformation. Finally, Lucien pressed a gentle kiss to her lips, one that spoke of forgiveness, of hope, and of the unbreakable bond they had forged. Eveline responded, her arms wrapping around him, holding him as if she could never let go. They stayed there for a long while, amid the remnants of loss, letting the world fall away until there was only the quiet heartbeat of their shared love. In the weeks that followed, Ashbourne Manor thrived not just as a restored estate, but as a home filled with laughter, light, and warmth. The village rejoiced in their prosperity, and Eveline's leadership, tempered by hardship, courage, and now love, became legend. But the true legacy was private, quiet, and enduring. The love between Eveline and Lucien, forged in fire, strengthened by forgiveness, and sealed in the ruins that had once defined despair. And as the sun set over the hills, casting a golden glow over the manor, Eveline whispered to Lucien, "We were reborn here, in the ashes, and now nothing can break us." Lucien pulled her close, holding her as the ruins behind them glimmered in the dying light, a testament to their trials and their triumphs. "Nothing," he agreed. Together in the heart of the ruins, they had found not just each other, but the courage, the strength, and the enduring power of love.